anything that involves any kind of wealth signaling,
Like,
scroll
how
as
do you mean?
quickly as you can.
Drawing it back to the manosphere, you see these actors taking advantage.
Well, they're playing on emotions, aren't they?
Exactly.
Because emotions is what drives decision making. Is now actually the hardest time financially to be growing up for a young 20-year-old?
Love it or loathe it, social media has become the place where many of us now go to get our investing news and tips. It's not just shaping what we invest in and who we invest with, but how we behave, from riskier assets to faster trading and social investing. The influence is growing, but so are the risks. The line between entertainment, education, and sales is becoming increasingly blurred, and with that, we're seeing a rise in misinformation, outright scams, and seriously bad actors. So in a sea of content, who can we actually trust? Welcome to Investing Unlocked, sponsored by PensionBee. Making money makes sense. With me, Georgie Frost.
And me, Rick Kelsey. Hello.
And joining us today is a Finfluencer royalty, a man who has over 1 million TikTok followers, personal finance educator, and all-round nice guy, Gabriel Nussbaum, aka That Money Guy. Welcome to you.
Thank you very much for having me.
But first, Rick. Welcome.
Thank you very much. What an intro.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
All-round nice guy, I'd like to say. But you, finance broadcaster, no stranger to social, though. You started the running channel, which is something of a social phenomenon, can I say?
It took a while to get there, but yeah, we got there in the end.
You're not supposed to say that on social. You're supposed to say it's really easy. And let me just, if you pay up, sign up to this course, you can...
Click my fingers, and there we were, 1 million people.
Fantastic. But you've done what a lot of traditional media journalists and broadcasters just can't seem to do for whatever reason. You've managed to cross that divide between social and traditional media. But with your finance head on, social media, a force for good or evil when it comes to investing?
Social media has been great for getting young people, not just in the UK, but around the world, to start investing. If you look at the figures about where we were pre-COVID compared to where we are now, Georgie, it's so much better. I mean, just look at the amount of 25 to 34-year-olds now who are doing it because they see other people investing and they see social media influencers going, well, have you thought about an ISA? Have you thought about a pension? Have you thought about putting your money here? Maybe it's better to do that than just save some money into a standard bank savings account. But then on the other hand, you've got Finfluencers who use investing to basically do some pretty dodgy stuff. And often that is around tax scams. So there's a balance.
Yeah. Firstly, I think it's not just Finfluencers. One thing that has happened is the rise of Fintechs.
Yeah.
And I think that has really made a difference as to how accessible and easy. I think about something like Moneybox, how you just, round up app, the gamification, which makes it so much easier to do. So it's a mixture of Finfluencers online, but also this kind of fintech environment that we're in. But I, like you, have thoughts about it. I don't tend to get the tax scams that come at me. What I get is a lot of traders. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some who are phenomenally good and give some really, really interesting tips.
Yeah.
But there are a lot who do promise a lot. I was on a panel once with one who said anyone can do trading and I can teach anyone how to do it. You could do it, but I think the statistics are something like 96% lose money. But let's get our guest in. Gabriel, welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. Firstly, was it a case for you of snapping your fingers and just the TikTok followers flooded in? I say this as someone who's, relatively new to TikTok, and it's hard.
It is hard.
Yeah.
It's a hard game. I wish my fingers had that effect because then it might say 2 or 3 million because I would have just kept clicking them.
Right. Show off.
Unfortunately, there was no magic tricks involved in it. This was something that began for me back in 2020, back at the early days of TikTok, just after it had been an app called Musical.ly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually starting to create financial education on YouTube, a much more classical platform for creators. And then someone mentioned to me, there's a version of this where you can create shorter form content, which as someone who was creating, writing, scripting, editing, putting this together, all as a one-man shop was music to my ears. 30 seconds instead of 10 minutes. My computer was like blowing up.
Why do you think I've joined TikTok,
Here you
Gabriel?
go. Exactly. But my biggest hesitation was I went on the app and I didn't see what I wanted to put on there. There was no education. It was an entertainment app. Often people saw, just people doing dance routines essentially on it. And I gave it a crack early 2021, late 2020. And you know what? It was just clear there was so much appetite for education on these platforms because the content, I think piece number 10 was my first viral piece. And I basically haven't looked back since.
Where do you think you came in that, I'll say we traditional media have failed?
I think it was just going where people were and still are, to be honest. I was a consumer of digital education, which allowed me to kind of have that understanding of how that entire ecosystem worked. So it might not be a failure because I still think as an entire industry, when I'm speaking about social media, it's still very much in its infancy. So there's no failure yet because it's got such a long, time length left to go. But we were just very early movers, the content creators, people that understood it. And me, myself, and this was where I was going to consume my knowledge. So I thought it's where I might as well put my knowledge.
Yeah.
And of course, these apps are designed to keep people on them for good and for bad. And that's obviously a completely different conversation about social media in general. But I thought, do you know what? If people are going to be on these apps in the first place, they might as well take something valuable from them.
But first, a word from PensionBee, who are sponsoring the series of Investing Unlocked. Pensions can feel frustrating, even for those who are engaged with their finances, often because of limited visibility and control. Too many pots and too little clarity. PensionBee, a leading online pension provider, aims to change that. Their platform lets you bring pensions together, make flexible contributions, and manage your retirement savings in a way that's clear and intentional. It's about treating your pension as part of your wider financial plan and retirement as a goal you can work towards with confidence. To get more control over your future, download the PensionBee app or visit their website. And as always, when investing, remember, capital is at risk. What are the most, and I'll ask you this too, Rick, what are the most common investing questions that people ask you?
The one most common question is, what do I invest in?
Oof, yeah.
Which is, of course, a question I cannot answer.
What do you say to that?
I tell people that there are many places online to go and learn about kind of what will work with your own risk appetite. You have to do your own education, knowledge, all this kind of stuff. Of course, you've seen people like Martin Lewis now talking about very well diversified global index funds, which is often a great starting point for people to look into. And so I'll say to people, do you know what? Unfortunately, I've got lots of content on different types of investments for kind of broad generalist investors, but I can never tell you specifically what to invest in. And that's kind of the rules. I've had to read the FCA guidelines on this again and again. They're constantly being updated. But people just want a quick answer, don't they?
It's nice to hear a Finfluencer who's read the FCA guidelines.
I was going to say, that came out of nowhere. I was not expecting that.
Well, I mean, the FCA have been cracking down, not on specifically people like Gabriel, but people who are giving out dodgy advice, essentially.
I think last year, wasn't it up 6,000%?
But it was still only really pretty small.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, and the people who were actually charged was only, I think it was a handful of people. So, it wasn't that many, but that's the difference, where you've got people saying, invest in this or come and do this course, and actually giving broad advice like Gabriel does, which is, this is how you can get into it. This is what I'd suggest you look at, but not pick this fund or come on this specific course with me for £1,000 a session and you will get X, Y, Z, and you will become as rich as me living my best life in Dubai, or maybe recently you had to fly back. So,
exactly.
This is the difference. And I also think it's fascinating, the question that you get asked, maybe because of the younger generation, like younger people who you get on TikTok, compared to kind of millennials that might ask me, or Gen Z, older Gen Z, so kind of, late 20s, 30-year-olds, early 40s, I would get, how much do I need to start investing? And that is actually such a big question, because what most people think they need to start investing, there was a bank survey on this. People thought, the majority of people when they were asked this, was around about £50,000.
Just to start?
50,000, yeah.
Wow.
Whereas actually what you need to start investing is £1. The misconception of where to start investing is changing quickly. If you went back to when Gabriel kicked this off, and he was ahead of the curve with all this stuff, kicking it off in 21, 22, and one with those starter Finfluencers who, the reason they've got so big is because they got into the game so early. There's been a big shift. Like Britain and lots of countries in Western Europe have tried to catch up with the Canadians and the Americans on this stuff. They were already there. They were already investing. But now millennials and Gen Z are really pushing on compared to other age groups in the UK and Europe because they're getting on it. And that's because of these fintech apps. The apps basically caught up with the Finfluencers and a lot of this stuff. They figured out, oh, you know what? What we want to do is we want to make automation really easy. We want to make it really simple for people. And that's where we had a burst of ready-made funds, which if you are stuck on where to get going, it's a simple place to start.
So I don't know that fintechs were following Finfluence. I downloaded my first investing app in 2017, I think. And I downloaded, and it was very much a lockdown thing. And I wonder if yours was very much a lockdown thing. We were all really, really aware of our finances. As financial journalists, we were talking about it all the time, the cost of living crisis. So it was almost a perfect storm for you to come into. But yes, I downloaded my Pension B app in 2020, July, I think. But actually, it works very well together, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was a perfect storm of many things. I think, obviously, COVID, people locked at home. A lot of extra cash was coming in. People didn't have anything to spend. So that was one massive element. Cost of living crisis meant people just are more about finances and wanting to be more astute with their finances. You had the rise of social media financial education, which meant it was just becoming more accessible for the first time, for good again and for bad. You had a lot of platforms coming in, making it so cheap and easy. And then you have this entire generation of, let's say, now 20-year-olds, late 20-year-olds coming through who are looking at the cost of things, for example, like buying a property, and just thinking, that is not where I'm going to have any ability to grow my wealth. That was my parents' generation. They had that kind of storm for themselves. For us, it's the opportunity to kind of buy equity in companies and do it really cheap, really easily, and in the palm of your hand.
Do you think there's no money in property?
No, there's definitely money in property, but it's hard to get into it in the first place. You need to have a little bit of money up front. And I think the capital was the element that this younger generation don't have, but they still want to have a bit of hope for the future. And I think that investing is their property. It's this generation's property.
That's such a bold claim. Do you think that the reality is that young people, this is the only route almost for them?
Gosh, I mean, what we're going to see with...
Can of worms open.
Yeah.
Let's get into the generational debate.
Well, there's a fear factor to it, isn't it? So pretty simply, people are constantly told if you're below about 45, 50, well, there's not going to be a state pension for you. If you're constantly told that enough times and people go, well, actually, what am I going to do for my retirement? How am I going to fund myself? And then you have a combination of apps getting easier and the ability to make a trade or to invest being a lot easier than it was 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
A lot easier. I mean, I remember having to get a print off about 10 pieces of paper just to buy some Ukrainian rapeseed. I mean, what on earth was I buying Ukrainian rapeseed for? I got a few tips for it, and I was like,
that's
right,
the other podcast.
Yeah. And this is, when you're starting out, you think, well, am I going to start? I'm going to get into individual shares, or am I going to buy a global track or whatever? So you kind of have a little dabble with small bits, and that's how I kind of got into it. But I remember having to do all this on paper, and you're just thinking, this has got so much easier, and it's that combined setup now of investing that you have advice from sound people, but you've also got some unsound people. You've got an ease of doing it, and you've also got a generation who want to do it. Now, those three things combined, and the third reason on there is because of the fear factor. That's why they want to do it. Those three reasons combined are why we've seen so many more people who are under 45 go, well, you know what? There might not be a state pension for me in 20 years' time. I better do something about it.
Well, throwing in state pension, but of course, you've been speaking a lot about things like student loans, property prices. I mean, it's a very, very different financial world at the moment. And I suppose one of the things that must make you resonate with people is for so long, people, I suppose my age and above, who've benefited from low interest rates for so long, who, had the job for life, I suppose, the golden pensions, the defined benefit pensions, those days are gone. And yet the advice that's still being written, and again, traditional media, comes from those people who've benefited from a different lifetime. Whereas you are speaking to people understanding all of those issues now that they're going through.
Yeah, it's just a really hard ecosystem out there. I know you spoke about the generational argument that we could have when is now actually the hardest time financially to be growing up for a
Is it?
young 20-year-old. I mean, there's so many different factors, but the one that I'm always drawn to is just the cost of a property versus the average salary. I don't know why, but that one has always just stuck in the back of my head. And now, what is it on average in the UK? 8 times, and in London specifically, we're getting close to 13
Yeah.
or something like that. And when I look back at when my parents were buying a property, it was closer to 4, 5.
Of mine, yeah. 4.
Yeah, something like that. That's the scary part, because the traditional education, not that there is much financial education full stop, but I guess if you're getting anything filtered down from your parents is, get a good job. Well, go to university first, get a good student loan,
Yeah.
get a good job, work hard, save what you can, get a property, job done.
Yeah.
My audience aren't just, 18, 20-year-olds in university. I'm getting told by, this Henry, now niche, which is the high earner, not rich yet
Gosh.
group. People earning 6 figures plus annually telling me they genuinely don't know where their paycheck goes month to month.
The cottage industry of people earning a lot of money but trying to earn slightly less because they'll lose things like childcare.
Yeah. We've looked at things about, I suppose, the positives. Can we say, and I want to focus on the positives because I will get into the negatives as well, but it has democratized investing, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that anyone now can pick up, everyone's got a phone right in their pocket, so you can do it like that, snap of your fingers, not get 1 million followers, but you can invest £1 within 5-10 minutes now on most platforms. So it's 100% democratized it. And I think it's also the education side of things. So I know we're going to have a long conversation about social media and how people are accessing their education and are they actually getting the right kind of education. But the fact that I don't know what percentage of people below the age of 30, for example, are probably on TikTok these days. I'm assuming it's probably quite high, or Instagram or any other app. They're able to literally go and see a tutorial on how to open a platform, follow it step by step. It's there for them. And I think that education has never existed before, really.
You make such a good point there, because I think we focus very much on young people. But let's not forget, I never had any financial education when I was growing up. There's the majority of people that contact me, probably because I'm older than you, but who don't know about their finances are 30, 40, 50, 60.
The whole reason I think why we're in this vicious cycle is the people delivering education never got given it in the first place. So how can they be confident in what to teach if they don't know how to do it themselves? And we've got this whole just horrible system that is just built into the UK. And I don't think it's a UK problem. I think it's a worldwide problem. Social media fills that gap to some extent. The government are trying to say they're making this whole shift towards personal finance education. How it plays out in practice, again, I back it 100%. I would love education. I don't care what level, if it's students, university, graduates getting their first job, high school, primary school, nursery. I think education needs to start as early as it can and be continuous throughout. I'm just a little bit nervous about how it's actually going to be implemented.
Do you ever get served financial education that you think, whoa, that's a load of rubbish?
Yeah, I mean, of course, my algorithm is kind of tailored towards financial education because I'm constantly looking at what other people are putting out there. And the majority of it is rubbish.
The majority?
Of course. You've got to bear in mind that social media is an attention game, right? So when I'm posting something on social media, I'm competing against, prank channels, against, your entertainment, comedy. Like, these are things that are built for the algorithm. people want that delivered to them. When they go on their phone to scroll, they are scrolling to switch off, not to go and think, I'd love a little bit of financial, investing tips or something like that right now.
Really
exactly.
Works.
The fact is the algorithm feeds that in for them because they have stopped. They do find it interesting, but that's not why they're going on social media in the first place. So I'm battling in this attention game. And when it comes down to an attention game, there are going to be people putting out rubbish that's really attractive because, as the three of us know, good financial practice is really, really boring.
Yeah.
Invest for the long term, put money in your pension. If you invest a little bit every month, you might get a little bit of wealth in 40 years, budgeting. Ugh.
So what's the key rubbish that people are putting out there?
Well, anything that involves any kind of wealth signaling, scroll as quickly as you can. The minute you see
this much money,
you see the marina in Dubai,
okay,
scroll. The minute you see anyone who says, I have earned this much money, so therefore, like you mentioned, here's my social proof.
Drives me nuts.
I don't know how many of you have watched The Manosphere recently with Theroux.
Yeah.
That's a prime example of people who have figured out the algorithm by saying crazy stuff, whether it's related to misogyny, racism, or bad financial advice, because that's also, they can say really, if you did this one thing, you could make thousands of pounds. That video will go viral straight away. I like to say that a lot of it is just common sense, but unfortunately we can't rely on that because the world isn't common sense. People really need to be handheld through this stuff, and it's a really dangerous topic. So when I'm scrolling and I'm seeing like rubbish, of course, there are thousands of brilliant creators, and I'm trying to make sure that they're the ones that are on my algorithm and I'm learning from. But there will be some that say things along like, invest in this year.
Specifics.
And it could be, they'll say specifics for sure. They'll say, I invest in this specific ETF. A UK investor who's quoting like funds that you can't even buy in the UK because they're like US. They'll be like VOO or blah, 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 S&P, which of course you can buy, but I won't kind of dive into those details.
This isn't a million miles away from some of the things that you might see on, some of the financial channels or financial papers.
Well, this is the scary stuff. They are getting really close and they sound almost the same as the content I'm putting out there, but they cross the line.
But it's also, what's their agenda? If you invest in this stock or via this platform or via this app, etc., will they get a cut, etc.? That's where there needs to be more clarity. But what you've just explained to me is an absolute free-for-all, it seems still, that through all of the rough, there's a few, like yourself, diamonds. And I was never a finance person when I was growing up. I was a sports journalist, and I had a back injury and I got heavily into debt. And I would have loved in my 20s to have had that kind of chat, it feels like, which my parents, you spoke about teachers, but my parents and lots of parents, they didn't have the tools or the information or the ability to talk to me about money. So I was completely left on my own. And I wish there were people like you. But for every one of you, there are thousands, tens of thousands of dubious actors. There is, obviously you don't want to get rid of the good stuff, but how can we try and manage it? Because some of this stuff is misinformation. You might not do that much harm, but some of it can be downright scams and absolutely wipe you of all your savings in your future.
I think you've got to look out for people who are advertising or pushing specific niche funds or specific stocks. So individual companies. And you've got to ask, well, why are they pushing that out? And then once someone has suggested something to you, I think the point then, that is when you need to do your research and check it out. There was a pretty well-known bank who's just done a big survey of people who took advice off Finfluencers and asked if they actually then backed it up to see if the claims they made were true, basically doing a little bit of journalism. And the vast majority, 55% of people, did not back it up. They took it as, that's true. I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with that specific stock. I'm going to go with that specific fund that I don't know anything about, and I'm going to take it. Where you can take more safely the world of advice from people like Gabriel, of course, is when people say, well, you know what, at the moment, defense stocks are doing pretty good. That's decent round advice. We can look at
say why they're doing well.
Why they're doing well.
Why they might do well in the future.
Or we can look at all world trackers. Okay, so over the last 5 years, Most all world trackers probably have gone up by an average of between 10 and 15%. That's better than if you whacked it in a cash ISA per year. That's better than inflation. So this is all good advice that comes in there. So the things I would be looking out for is A, is someone giving you something very niche, a fund or a specific stock? And B, have you done your homework and looked beyond that person to see if it's legitimate?
Do you know what it makes me think about? There was a famous psychological study that looked at jams in a supermarket. A supermarket had 26 versions of jam and it offered people to try it. And if you try it, you can get a discount, etc. And then they offered 6. More people bought from the 6 than from the 26 because there's an overwhelm of choice. And it seems to me that what we're really after, which goes back to your question, what should I invest in? What we're really after is one person that can just tell us the answer. There's a sea of information. If you find one person that you like the sound of or you can trust, you want to go with that person, because I don't want to be reading about company results. I don't want to be reading about all of this information. I want one person that can just say to me, pick this strawberry jam. Great. Thank you. I don't have to make a decision. And that's what social media does. It crystallizes it down to a 1-minute video, very simplistic.
Yeah.
Buy this stock. You don't have to think about it. Stick your money there. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is going to be these changes with the advice gap that's being looked at right now, right? Where, platforms are going to be able to start suggesting based on people like you and, X, Y, and Z, you might want to consider investing in this platform. And I think that's brilliant, because the advice gap is really bad in this country. It's either zero or you have loads and loads of money and you pay someone who's experienced to do this, and they don't necessarily, beat
Which is why people don't do
any kind of returns. Yeah. But I think one thing that does work in social media's favor, and why I'm on there and why I back it up, and I do believe that it's a force for good, is because a lot of the time when there are bad players there, they don't last very long. They do get found out and they'll disappear very quickly. Of course, you'll have people taking their place. But I think what people are starting to figure out, what, like you said, but maybe not as extreme, is they figure out who they do like to listen to. And then they listen to them for a year, for 2 years. They see them doing partnerships with legitimate banks. And they're like, okay, well, banks do a lot of their due diligence, right? So that person maybe is speaking kind of sensible stuff. They'll then, realize this person's never pushed them into any product or try to take them off platform into a Telegram group or anything like that, where of course there are some legitimate players that are doing that, because there are elements of further education. Of course you can pay for courses and be parts of communities to help you around these kind of things, but you can get a real sense as to whether someone is trying to force you somewhere else so they can say things that maybe they can't say on social, versus people who are, my education is free, has always been free. I think I might have kind of like done a webinar backed by a bank to explain investing for beginners. But aside from that, everything I've ever done has been literally free for my audience. And I've done it for 5-6 years now.
Yeah.
And that is often the trust that builds up over a long period of time, versus someone who's there for 3 months and they're gone.
Before we carry on, a quick word from our sponsor, PensionBee. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you care a fair bit about investing and making the most of your money. But here's the thing, you don't have to be a pensioner to care about your pension. In fact, the earlier you pay attention, the more powerful it can be. Your pension is likely to be one of, if not the biggest investments you have, yet it's often the one people ignore the longest. That's where PensionBee comes in. They're a leading online pension provider focused on helping people build confidence and take real control of their retirement savings at any stage of life. Their app and website make it easy to combine old pension pots, manage contributions flexibly, and see exactly what's happening with your money all in one place. You can also access your pension from age 55, rising to 57 from 2028. If you want to take a more active role in your pension investing, download the PensionBee app or visit their website to get started. Remember, when investing, your capital is at risk.
I do wonder, getting back to that question though, when it comes to Finfluencers, why sometimes it's just not a little bit more directed at ready-made funds when it comes to investing? Because I think so many Finfluencers kind of drive you down the route of, okay, ETFs, exchange-traded funds, a group of companies put into a bulk, maybe 20 or 30 companies or up to 150, roughly. And you buy £100, $100 worth of that fund. You go to one of the platforms, you do that. Which one do you do? Well, you go onto a standard trading platform. There are hundreds of them. I could pick a defense one. I could pick an all-world tracker. I could pick the S&P 500 of the top 100 companies in America. I could pick the FTSE of the top 100 companies in the UK.
I picked a Canadian one recently.
A Canadian one. Yeah, exactly. So to feel a bit more Canadian.
Yeah, Canadian pride, you know?
You can do that. But I do sometimes wonder, and I suppose I'm slightly concerned about this as well, that involves a certain amount of expertise, even just picking a pie or an ETF and going, right, I want that. And you could argue that there's a gamble that you pick the right one. Once you're in, you're investing, and you're regularly investing, and you automate, fantastic, that's great. But there's still a bit of a gamble going on there. What is probably better, and it would be, I think, pretty useful if more Finfluencers did this. I'm not picking at you, Gabriel, by the way. Is if more people just said, you know what, there are these things, and they are active investments. They are called ready-made funds, and they are a great way, not just for starter investments, but for people who don't want to be involved. Like you were talking about, Georgie. You said, hang on, I want someone to just, the jam analogy. I just want someone to do it and sort it out. And go, well, you know what? Where's my risk? Am I cautious or am I adventurous? What type of person am I? And actually, is my character cautious or adventurous? And your character might be very different to your investment character, your investment animal inside you.
Yeah. I'm an animal when it comes to investing.
But are you an animal in real life?
I'm a sloth.
So these characters often they contrast each other and they play with each other. And what I'd like to see more of is people saying, you know what, I know this all sounds really pretty scary. These ETFs, I'm picking a bunch of 20 companies in defense, or I'm having a bit of British companies, a bit of Canadian, bit of American. I'd say, you know what, let's just have a look at your appetite for risk. And let's go, right, let's start something called automation. Let's start $100, £100 a month. Let's start that monthly, and then let's pick a level we're happy with one of these funds, and let's start from there. Because it's an easier way to kick off, not just for people who don't know a lot about it, but actually for people who, like you said, Georgie, just want someone else to get it done for them.
Absolutely.
It's a brilliant point. And if I go to my own investing journey, I started on a robo-investing platform. That's how I got started. I didn't know what to choose or what to pick. Basically what you're describing, an active management platform where I didn't look up anything. I answered a few questions in a questionnaire.
Yourself a stocks and shares ISA.
Yeah, and I got told which was the most suitable for me. I actually then moved onto a platform that didn't have any individual companies on it. It was a platform that just offered funds, and some of like the most famous funds in the world built by the platform, before then moving onto another platform that gives you those options, plus, individual company options, basically gives you anything that you want to invest into. And that is a very natural progression. That is a journey that most people go on. And so something that I do try and say when I'm not working with specific partners, and I think this is sometimes I actually say it when I do work with specific partners, is when people ask me, which is just underneath what to invest in, which is where do I invest? I tell them anywhere.
As in which platform?
What platform do I get started on?
Anywhere.
Well, in brackets, FCA regulated, FSCS protection, thank you very much.
Yes.
But I then say anywhere, because ultimately you learn on the job.
Yeah.
Most of these platforms are pretty good. Okay, some will have slightly higher fees than others. Some might not have as many options as others.
I mean, do your research, ask around, get
exactly.
Make sure that...
But often getting started is way more important than getting started on the right platform.
100%. Absolutely. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Could not agree with you more. The best advice I ever got when I started my personal pension as a self-employed person, I was like, where should I go? What should I do? And this brilliant woman, she just said to me, do your research in as much as you can. Just go on something like This Is Money or The Times or something.
A little Google search.
Exactly.
Top investing platforms UK.
Exactly.
Read about the 5.
Start somewhere.
Which or whatever, whoever does these reviews, read what sort of Trustpilot review they get. But yes, exactly.
And if you look at the difference as well, I'm glad you mentioned fees there. There's also a bit of a myth that the active funds, as in the managed funds, as in there is a human there picking 50 companies, and every month he sits down at his desk, she sits down at her desk and goes, you know what, I'm going to take 5 out, I'm going to put 5 in. There is a myth that these actively managed funds are all a lot more than the passive funds. They are almost always more.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, the difference is not as big as it was 5 years ago. How much the active funds charge compared to the passive funds, it has really actually shrunk the difference. You know why? Because people like Gabriel are sending everyone to ETFs and saying, do passive investing, pick low cost, pick 0.15% for your investments. So now you've got some actively managed funds, which, most of the time the market will win on a fund or an ETF. Yeah, but there are some funds, and I've stuck. I do ETFs, but I have stuck with one of the original ready-made portfolios that I had, because it is consistently drawn in between 12 and 20% a year for apart from 2022 when everyone had a bad year. Over the last few years, and 26 is probably going to be down as well because of what's been going on. But that fund works. So if you are on an investing journey and you have a ready-made fund and everyone's telling you, move yourself to an ETF, and every Finfluencer you say, don't necessarily.
It's actually the moving in and out that costs people
costs
the
a
most
lot. Costs a lot of money. So have a look what your fund has done over the last 5 years. Get that piece of paper, the fact sheet that tells you what it's done every year for the last 5 years. Look at the numbers, because it probably won't work it out yourself. Put it in and work out the average.
There's a social media TikTok video in the making right now.
I'm having a rant.
Are you getting inspiration here, Gabriel? Are you going to get
I'm just honoured to have driven down that fee for you. Saved you a bit of money. We'll talk commission later.
One thing I do want to focus on, and we have lightly brushed over the surface of it throughout this conversation, and that is psychology. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we were all economics man, that perfect, or woman, that perfect idea of, everything that we do is the best thing for our financial good, etc. But we're not. And you mentioned the Louis Theroux's Inside the Manosphere documentary, which to me was enormously about money and the way that money is so often tied to status, masculinity, all of that sort of thing, and identity. I mean, it's always been thus. But the thing that social media has done is broadened it out, these sorts of messages and these sorts of ideas about money and identity, and to a much younger audience. And I have to ask both of you as guys, and you both watched it, does that concern you? Do you feel almost an extra responsibility, Gabriel, when you go online to be like, guys, money is a tool?
I would say that the majority of my content now has an element of the word you mentioned, psychology, in it now. Because I'm a firm believer that I used to say money is 50% mathematical, 50% emotional. And the more I've learned about the topic, and I will admit, I'm learning as I'm teaching. That's part of the pull. I think that's why people are so drawn towards creators and finfluencers. It's because they're being really raw and authentic. When they learn something, they like to teach it. They don't tell people they're an expert in anything. They share a journey that they're going on, and often their own practices. And one thing that I've learned massively is I would now take that number from 50-50, probably closer to 90-10.
Wow.
Really?
Money is mathematical. But people don't make mathematical decisions. No. People make decisions based on upbringing, based on what they see. But a lot of it's just based on their gut and the way that it makes them feel.
And into that, as we're seeing it, drawing back to the manosphere, you see these actors taking advantage.
Well, they're playing on emotions, aren't they? Because emotions is what drives decision making. Even that feeling of, if you do what I do, you'll look like me. You'll have this life that I live. I'm like,
yeah, I'm all right.
But they kind of, amongst the craziness, and we don't have to dive into the manosphere stuff, but I think a lot of what they're doing is they understand the psychology of what they're doing. And what they're doing is preying on vulnerabilities and people's hope to try and get them into their position, because they say, well, if you're like me, you're going to have everything in life, you're going to be super happy, etc. And I think what I've always tried to do with the content that I've made is be really realistic about it. I like to show the mistakes I make.
Mm.
I like to tell people that when I go to the office, I buy lunch out every single time. And it is a shocking financial decision, but it's a financial decision that I make because it makes me happy.
Yeah.
A lot of finance is happiness. I make a lot of content that kind of illustrates the difference between saving intensely throughout your whole life, you know, not going on friends' holidays and not going to a mate's wedding and not buying a car just so you can retire as young as possible versus the person that, you know, spends it all and then has to keep working past 60, 70 years old.
Yeah.
And the question is, I mean, the comments are filled with, this is right, no, this is right, no, this is right, no, this is right. But the lesson I'm trying to teach is it's all about balance. Life is just a balancing game. But I like to get people thinking from that emotional perspective. There's no mathematical answer there. I can't tell you which maths is right because I'm still figuring that out myself. And often I'll show people that side of me, both through these kind of storylines, but also through my own personal anecdotes. You know, going out buying coffee in London. Again, people say, oh, you're a personal finance expert paying £4.50 for a coffee every time you go out.
So glad I don't drink coffee.
Oh, honestly,
tea's just as expensive.
I know.
You like matcha, yeah?
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you said that because I do think that oftentimes we're almost told off. And as a result, you turn away from finance. If you feel like you're always doing it wrong, actually, it's there to be enjoyed. And you make that decision. I make that decision most days to go and buy shop-bought coffee. I love it. It's my pleasure. And you know what? Stuff you. If you tell me I shouldn't do it, I enjoy it. And if something gives you pleasure, don't cut it out of your life if you're trying to cut down on spending because you will fail and then you'll feel bad. So find another area of your life to cut back on. There are always areas you can look to. But with that, I wanted to look at how you can try and think rationally because both you and I have spoken about how we take those decisions. We know that they're wrong, but we still do it anyway because on balance, it is okay for us to do it. How can you bring that kind of more methodical mindset to what you're seeing online and on social media so you can, as much as possible, disassociate the emotion when you are watching a video that says, want to get £10,000 in an instant, watch this video?
I guess it's just, bearing in mind, I have about 60 to 90 seconds to give someone a lesson. And you've probably just asked me one of the most complex questions in the world of finance,
The clock's
which
going.
is how can I kind of teach people to be both methodical and understand their emotions all at the right time, is make the right decisions for themselves whilst enjoying today and making sure they don't have a horrible, toxic relationship with money. A 90-second video is not going to teach you that. But the journey I'm trying to bring people on is I'm hoping they're going to see multiple points of what I'm doing throughout my life. And I try to lead by example. And sometimes leading by example is showing the bad mistakes that I've made with my money. You know, it's showing the fact that I've lived through 3 financial crashes even since I've started investing and showing how I react to that from an emotional perspective. Telling people that when I started investing for the first year, I probably checked my phone every single day and was so close to hitting that sell button because it's the inside of you is screaming, saying, what are you doing here? And having to teach yourself to bear with those emotions. And I think that I wish I could just grab someone and download everything that I've learned into their brain. But all I'm trying to do is just teach through my experiences, show them the highlights, show them the lowlights, and then also show them the ways that I've taught myself to go around the emotions. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So the word automation's come up a few times in this conversation. One of the most powerful things that modern technology has given us to remove emotion from what we're doing, that ability to just send money off into your pension or send money off into your investments or move money into your saver account on whatever platform, because then you don't get in the way of it. People get in the way of their own, future, their own right decisions. That's the element that tries to teach them methodical. There isn't much more to it. And I'll often say this as well. The moment someone's promising you riches, the moment someone's promising you quick wins, it's an absolute lie. And people are becoming a little bit more tuned onto it as opposed to 4 or 5 years ago when I started and it was the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
If you could download, though, to all of our brains, one piece of, I won't say advice, but some piece of knowledge that you've got about investing or even just finance generally, what's the one thing you wish we all knew that you've learned?
It's probably not for you two, but it's for 90% of people that are scared to take the next step with their finances. I like to tell people to just start. And you said it about investing or about finances in general, but often people hesitate because that's the biggest threshold to get over. You spoke about investing. Now you can start with just £1. I think most people have a quid to throw away. Most people probably throw a lot more away than that on a Thursday night drinks, if you know what I mean, post work. So just throw that into that thing, or open up your first ever SIP and put a quid into that, or open up your first short-term saver account and throw a quid into that, and just start doing something. I know you wanted like a quick 1-minute answer, but I had a really interesting conversation.
You can take your time. Take your time, enjoy it.
Yesterday, I got approached by a young man. He must have been about 21 years old. He was doing not an apprenticeship. He was doing like a year in industry. So he was working for the first time in his life, about to go back for his last year of university. So smart, so bright, studying, I think, like some mathematical blah, blah, blah. So he's prime numbers guy. And he came up to me and he goes, my confidence is so low. I don't even know where to start. Personal finance seems like an absolute myth to me. I watch all of your stuff, but like I still feel so stuck. Like, what can I do? And I said to him, aside from reading a brilliant book, The Psychology of Money, which I think every young person should probably have put into
Morgan Housel.
Yeah, Morgan Housel. I think that would be like my go-to. Just give that a read. I don't care how long it takes to get through it. But number 2, I said to him, like, just start. He's like, I don't know how to start investing. I said, do you have a £1 throwaway? Yeah, do that. Do you have a saving account? No, put £1 into that. Because that's the barrier that most people need to cross, is getting the accounts open and then growing the habits.
Yeah.
Because once you've done those things, everything else just compounds from there.
All right, then. Gabriel, we'll do the £1,000 move. If I was to unexpectedly give you £1,000, apologies, I won't, but if I were to, what would you do with it?
I would send it to the following bank account details. If I was to have £1,000 and I'd never done anything else with that money before, it would go straight into an emergency fund.
You now.
I mean, now.
You now. Like, would you just? You can spend it on lunch, like if you want to.
Do you know what?
Work lunch for £1,000.
If I had £1,000 right now, I would take half of it and I'd put it into an education pot for myself. I know that sounds really sensible, but I don't invest.
Education pot?
Like an invest into myself kind of pot.
Okay.
Like a bit of some books, maybe a course that I want to do, something like that, because I don't do that enough myself. And I think that that's one of the best returns you can actually have with money. And do you know what I do with the other half? I put it wherever I want. I would buy something nice, some clothes.
New pair of shoes or something?
Yeah.
Not saying anything about your shoes.
Honestly, these shoes are about 4 years old and they probably do need replacing. Don't look at the soles, please. I'm going to hide my feet away from you. Because I think, as my grandma told me every year of my life between the age of 0 and 20, not that I remember the first 3, but after that, she said whenever she gave me money, save half, spend half. And it's one of the best pieces of advice I ever got.
Good.
That really is good.
Rick reflects.
That really is good. Yeah. Very, very good.
Well done, Grandma Beck.
Yeah. You can steal that one for your kids.
Yeah.
Rick reflects.
Do you know what? The thing is, if it sounds too good to be true and you're seeing a Finfluencer telling you to invest in something specific or put money into a course or go somewhere or invest here, or you've got time pressure put on you, which is one of the oldest yet still most efficient tricks in the book, to put some money somewhere where you're never going to make it back, then it probably is too good to be true. So be wary of who is speaking, but also if you do think, well, maybe this person has got a point, do your research, double check it. Don't be like the 55% of people who regret making an investment because of what they've seen by a Finfluencer, and go to the Finfluencers who are decent, who are like Gabriel, who are financial educators and doing a good job out there. And when you do get there, start investing, keep it going, don't stop, automate, and eventually you'll probably do pretty well out of it.
Lovely. Rick, thank you. Gabriel, thank you as well. And thank you for joining us. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on social or email. Remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and make sure to tell your friends who don't know their hodls from their povs about us as well. Before you go, just a quick reminder that everything you've heard on this podcast is for information and education only. It's not personal financial advice. Investing involves risk, and if you're unsure, it's best to speak to a regulated financial advisor.